Spring 1944. Allied bombers are hitting German cities in broad daylight, and the Luftwaffe pilots sent up to stop them are dying in numbers the German High Command cannot replace. The B-17s fly in tight formations at high altitude surrounded by escort fighters, and the Germans climbing to intercept them in piston-engine planes are getting torn apart before they can close the distance. Germany had the answer sitting on a runway. The Me-262 was faster than anything the Allies had in the sky, fast enough that no escort fighter could run it down in a straight line. The pilots who flew it knew exactly what it could do, but then Hitler ordered the world's most advanced fighter converted into a bomber. The question is not whether the Me-262 could have changed the air war. It is why the man running the war refused to let it try. The Me-262 flew at around 540 miles per hour. The P-51 Mustang, the best American fighter in Europe, topped out around 440 miles per hour. A German jet pilot who did not want to fight could simply fly away, and there was nothing an Allied escort could do about it. Against bomber formations, the math got ugly fast, since a plane closing at that speed gave gunners almost no time to track before the jet was already through the formation and gone. That speed made the jet effectively untouchable in straight flight. The Jumo 004 engines were the weak point. They ran hot and were temperamental throughout the war, and early versions would flame out if a pilot pushed the throttle too quickly. But the airframe was a full generation ahead of anything else in the sky, and the men who tested it understood that immediately. By mid-1943, Luftwaffe commanders were pushing hard for mass production and immediate deployment as an interceptor. Germany did not need to win air superiority over England to survive. It just needed to stop Allied bombers from destroying the industrial base that kept the war machine running. From the ball-bearing plants in Schweinfurt to the oil refineries in Ploesti, the bombing campaign was compounding damage every month, and German production was taking hits it could not absorb forever. The Me-262 was built for this problem, slashing through bomber formations with 4 30mm cannons and disappearing before escorts could react. Even a modest force of jets could have made the bombing campaign too costly to sustain. That was the strategic goal, not winning the air war outright, but making the cost of each mission higher than the Allies were willing to pay. The aircraft was ready and the commanders were begging for it. The downfall of the Me-262 started when Hitler looked at the world's most advanced fighter and saw a bombing platform. His obsession with hitting back at England ran deep, and it dictated every major decision he made through the middle years of the war. The V weapons and the long-range shelling of London were not sideshows. They were the core of how he intended to win. Defense was weakness. Offense was will. When he saw a demonstration of the jet in late 1943, he did not ask about its climb rate or how many B-17 bombers it could shoot down. He wanted to know if it could carry bombs. The engineers told him that it was technically possible to fit bomb racks under the fuselage, and that was all the permission he needed. Hitler immediately branded the aircraft a blitz bomber and ordered the entire production line to change course, which effectively silenced every expert recommendation the Luftwaffe had spent months preparing. The commanders who had built a massive logistical case for a jet interceptor force watched their entire strategy vanish in a matter of minutes. Hermann Göring was the one man who should have stopped this. As head of the Luftwaffe, he had the rank and the data to prove Hitler was making a mistake, but he stayed silent. Whether paralyzed by fear or simply unwilling to push back, he became a rubber stamp. His senior officers were begging for a fighter, and their commander told them to deliver a bomber. Adding bomb racks created weight and drag, stripping away the speed advantage that made the jet dangerous. Factories retooled, manuals were rewritten, and pilots trained in high-altitude combat were forced to learn ground attack tactics. The Me-262 ended up flying low and slow over targets where Allied anti-aircraft guns could track and kill it. Adolf Galland, the most decorated fighter leader in the Luftwaffe, fought the bureaucracy until he was pushed out. He told Hitler to his face that using the jet as a bomber was a waste of their only real advantage, and his honesty got him stripped of command. Nobody else dared speak up after that. By the time the war ended, Germany had built over 1,400 of these jets. Only a tiny fraction ever saw combat as interceptors, and historians still argue over how many actually made it into the sky. The rest of the fleet sat on airfields waiting for parts, or they were simply blown apart on the ground by Allied bombers. The planes existed in large numbers, but the organized force needed to use them never materialized. While the German High Command spent all of 1944 arguing over bomb racks and doctrine, Allied planners were already busy making the jet irrelevant. The arrival of the P-51 Mustang changed the math of the air war because it could finally escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. This meant that German pilots, whether they were in jets or piston engine planes, no longer had a safe zone where they could attack unescorted bombers. The massive window of opportunity that existed in 1943, when Allied fighters had to turn back early due to fuel limits, had slammed shut. Allied commanders also developed a specific doctrine to hunt the jets. You could not catch an Me-262 at full speed, but you could kill it while it was trying to get airborne. American pilots ran systematic patrols over German jet bases, circling and waiting. Because early jet engines took a long time to spool up, the Me-262 was vulnerable during takeoff and landing. Mustangs would dive in to pick them off right at the runway. The fuel crisis made everything worse. Jet engines burned through fuel fast, and by late 1944, German refineries were being leveled by Allied raids. Gallen scraped together an elite unit called JV-44, and his pilots proved the aircraft was still deadly, tearing through Allied formations. But they were flying 20 or 30 sorties a day, while American factories pumped out hundreds of new planes. No technology could fix the broken math of the war at that point. The Me-262 was never going to win the war for Germany on its own. By 1944, the industrial gap between the Reich and the combined Allied economies was too wide for any single weapon to close. Even so, the jet could have made the bombing campaign expensive enough to force a change in pace, and slowing that destruction might have bought the regime more time. Instead, it spent those years being rebuilt into a mediocre bomber nobody needed, because the man at the top wanted to attack rather than defend. And every officer with the knowledge to stop him stayed silent. After the war, Allied engineers dismantled every Me-262 they could find. The jet technology Germany refused to deploy properly became the baseline for the American, British, and Soviet air forces. Germany lost the air war, but everyone else inherited the aircraft that might have changed it.